Hey, good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. I don't know how many people are actually going to be joining this live stream. It's like unannounced and just kind of out of the blue, out of the dark, really. But I was kind of bored and going over some of the comments that were on earlier's video that I had put out today, talking about the farmers over in France. And I was talking about it being an economic force that was at play. And a lot of people had really come back on that, saying, no, dude, you're completely lost. This is not an economic thing that's happening. This is totally a political matter. And they give all these reasonings for it. And I totally get it. Like, because there's so much politics to look at, especially just about every single thing out there can have like a political viewpoint attached to it. But really, when it comes to economics, it's very primitive. Like, the economy is you and me and the decisions that we make and the businesses that we start and the things that we do. That's the economy. Like, it's not politics. It's not anybody out there like that, right? These people interact with the economy, but they're not the ones who are in charge of it. Now, I want to read this section coming from Cantillon's essay, and it's very simple, right? And it goes like this. There is no country where the increase of population is more limited than among the savages in the interior part of America. They neglect agriculture, live in the forest, and live by hunting animals found there. As trees consume sap and substance of the earth, there is little pasture for animals. And since an Indian eats several animals in a year, 50 or 100 acres often supply only enough food for one single Indian. So now, when we think about this for just a minute, right? The amount of land that was needed for just these Indians, and he goes later on to talk about how they fight these bloody wars and stuff like that, right? But there is only so much land, right? And then after that, it cannot support any more people than that. That's as far as it's going to go. And I don't care like what political like speech, like you can have like two types. Let's kind of take it down to a story real quick, right? So you got two families, two tribes, right? And they've been kind of like, living on each side of this mountain, and they didn't really know each other. They kind of knew each other was there, but whatever. They just kind of, just did their own thing for years and years and years, right? Generations went by. Well, they got eventually so big that they started encroaching in on each other's hunting grounds, right? Well, this is survival. Like, there's nothing they can do. There's only so much land, and there's only so many animals, and there's so many of us, right? And so this is where the battle begins. But then you can have one smart dude who comes up and says, yo, wait a minute, stop. Let's not fight yet, right? I got an idea, right? Because we're going to discuss this and we can get along and we're rational people, we can kind of figure out how to grow food, right? And maybe we don't need to kill each other. We can actually like live in some sort of like, peaceful relationship here and figure out a way that we can all like live happily here, right? Because we can grow this food. And that's cool until the population grows big enough, until you can't grow enough food to survive them, and then you're back into fighting wars again, right? And now this is going to be the outcome. If you look back on just about everything, this is like the most primitive way of looking at economics, but this is essentially what it is, right? It comes down to what it is that these two people are going to do for survival, right? And then once those two people start growing and everybody starts interacting with each other, we start coming up with power plays, right? Because, okay, let's take it again for example, right? Like these farmers over here in France. Okay? People want to have like all this like stuff they said that happened politically that, is causing the reasons that's going on over there. And a lot of it is like very valid stuff. Like in fact, all of it's probably valid stuff, right? But the problem with it is this. Let's take, for example, there was a nation that had very few farmers in it, right? And these farmers were left to just grow their crops however they could, because there wasn't really anybody who was going to tell them that they couldn't, because, there wasn't anybody there, right? There's no power, there's no money, there's nothing, right? So you had these farmers who grow. And as time goes on, let's say that nation becomes richer and richer, right? Well, as time goes on and the nation becomes richer and more money comes in and more people are growing food, right? Well, all of a sudden now you have a political atmosphere that can grow because now you have people who can then consume without producing anything. This is where the government steps in, right? See, they never would have existed if it was this poor nation where it's just a couple of people running around. But because the economy has grown and it's powerful, now you got politicians up in there saying, oh, hey, we need to govern things, right? We need to take from these and give to those. And this would never have existed in the first place if it hadn't grown to the point that it did, right? Now, I am like just blasting through this and not going into much detail on it, but you guys can see how this could happen, right? How all of a sudden you have this power that's now existing within this country because of the industriousness of the people, right? Not because of the politician. Politician can't go up there and go like, you know what, hey guys, get together. You know what? I got an idea. Maybe we can get all these people out here to become industrious, inventive people and try to go for to be prosperous. And we're going to be in charge of making that happen. Like, does that sound right? Or does it sound right that these people were just intuitively wanting to try and make things happen for themselves, and in conjunction with other people, power was grown from that, right? See, this is why I don't look at things in a political fashion. I look at it from an individual. We are it. We are the economy, not the politicians. They interact with what it is that we are doing. They can only take from us, right? They don't produce anything. They can only consume. And they take from this group and hand to another. All right. Sorry, I don't mean to be like just ranting away. We got 91 people up in here. Wow, way more than I thought would join in. I was hoping I would just get a couple. All right, cool. And the $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Yo, what's up here? Okay, got all nighter Jinx. Isaac. Okay, yo, UE. What is it, buddy? Sup, Isaac. Okay. Hey, politics is like world wrestling. Yeah, the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. It's a dog and pony show. Hey, Richard. Hey, Hyder. Yes, it is. Finally, my keyboard works. I was here at the first word. Right on. Yes, John, it's WWF for sure. Morning, 6:30 a.m. here. Right on. Hit the like button, everybody. Right on, Dishes. Thank you. Hey, check it out. Dishes is almost to her 500th subscriber. She's like 30-something subscribers away from getting to the 500th subscriber. Very close to having that channel being able to be monetized. It's so cool. All right, moving on here. Diaper change time. Right on. All right. Per capita, which is used in more transactions, dollars or political power. America has a lot of open land and dying cities to grow food. Actually, America is really, really good at growing food. That's like one of the things that we're actually really pretty decent at and still are. And like, I think that's like something that is probably like so ingrained into Americans, like especially like when you get into, the central, the Midwest part of the country. It's like I don't think they know how to do anything else but farm. What up, y'all? Grateful to you, Simon, for going live. I can't handle any more California storm coverage. Yeah, I mean, I want to bring it up and talk about it just to see what's, kind of out there. Actually, I wanted to ask All Nighter how he's doing over there, but he seems to be doing all right because he pops right on these live streams. So you always say just listen to the Fed when they say higher for longer, etc. with regards to how long they keep interest rates elevated. Why believe them if they lied before the forward guidance, etc.? Okay, hold on, MD. I think that's a great question. That's actually a really good question because people ask, it's just like, when do you listen, when do you not, right? Now, here's the thing that I have found, right? And from in my videos, my past videos, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I cover a lot of these speeches, right? So the information that I am getting, I generally am looking at it from those speeches. Like I found something in the speeches that is now relating out there in the world, right? The statements coming from the mainstream media. Now, when you have a Fed governor out there doing an interview, you reading something in the Wall Street Journal where they're being quoted, right? This is where the forward guidance, where the credible threats lie. They don't necessarily lie in the speeches. That's not because people don't read the speeches. They don't, that there's. I mean, they could put a credible threat in there, nobody would even see it. So it's not in the speeches themselves. The credible threat is is being presented out there in the corporate media. So that's an easy way to tell if it's a credible threat is probably that it's being presented on the mainstream media. When I'm getting most of the information that I feel like when I say listen to the Fed, at least the way I feel that when I'm presenting that kind of statement, I'm talking about their documents, like the stuff that you're reading directly from them, right? Not the mainstream media spin on stuff, right? Because that's exactly what it is. And it's hard to take any kind of information from like. See, that's one of the reasons why I even brought up the whole French protest thing, because I don't know anything about that. Like, what do I know about French protests, right? But just reading through the article and I'm listening to some of the statements coming from, their quotes themselves, right? We would I'm choosing, like, literally one of the quotes in there is, I'm choosing to buy the expensive domestic products so that I can support my domestic supplier, right? But foreign production is cheaper. How many times have you heard me say this? I mean, it's just like, when somebody says, dude, you're lost, I'm like, this lady literally just said it. Like, straight up. She just literally said exactly describing how the Cantillon effect works, where domestic manufacturers are being driven out by higher prices due to cheaper foreign production coming in. I mean, it's just like she is consciously making the decision to go against what human nature would tell her to do, and that's to buy the cheaper steak. Right? I mean, it's just like it blows me away. I mean, it's just like it's literally right there in black and white, and yet it's just like it just right over people's heads. And I get it. Like if you're not looking for it, then it wouldn't be recognizable. If you are looking at it through the eyes of a political view, like you are, like I am looking at this from this political view, you will definitely see it. Like there's no doubt about it, and you'll have hours worth of being able to debate whether or not it's a political affair that is happening there. I mean, it's just like there's just so much there to talk about. Right? But when you look down at the deep-rooted causes of, in the economic forces that are at play, you can kind of set those politics aside and say, like, wow, if France really wasn't in a position in which that the domestic manufacturing of food was so expensive, then they wouldn't have the foreign competition coming in. It sounds very much like the Cantillon effect. Straight up, right? Sorry, I'm just like, I don't mean to apologize every couple of minutes, but I feel a little wound up today. I haven't even really had that much coffee today, I haven't had any since this afternoon. All right. But I think that's a great question, and that's why I'm saying, like, listen to their speeches, listen to the words that they actually say, not the stuff that's being presented to you. Don't listen to anything that's being presented to you, or if you do, just take it with a grain of salt. Just like, okay, well, whatever, it's here nor there. It's just the information they want me to know. I want to know what it is that they're talking about, and that happens in their speeches. So. All right. Midtown Columbus Incorporated. Thank you so much for the $5. Georgia here, different name. Don't reply, just supporting a good informative channel. Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. MD is not about believing them, but rather understanding their position. That's it too. And this is what gets me. This is like, I got that one, right, guys? I mean, if there was anybody out there on YouTube who was screaming the average inflation rate over time and that they're not going for a 2% target, and if Jerome Powell didn't just straight up say that's exactly what it is that they are doing, and I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know who else has done that. It's just like, I mean, I guess I don't really follow a whole lot of other YouTubers out there either because I'm just so into my own thing here, but really that's like, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it, man. I was just like, but I got that one, Let's go up here. All right. People just plowed and hoped for the best. So research and development. A politician could theoretically produce in his off time. Oh, no. No doubt about that. Like, a politician himself can be a producer, like can be like a businessman, can be somebody who's out there being active and stuff like that. The position of being a politician doesn't do anything but take. All right. That can only take. There is nothing it can do to produce. Right? It can only take taxes from other people and try to attempt to produce something that usually doesn't work out too well. Like sometimes it does work out pretty well, like, the space initiatives, and stuff like that, getting stuff into space. But really, there's no way that government can compete with private, right? That's why, private's going into space now and government's basically getting out of it. It's the, uh, um, what would be the economic implications for nuking Australia? Okay. Thanks for the Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. All right. Though you had a bowl cut because the thumbnail. Huh. The U.S. has some of the most fertile land. Yeah, it does. 98 watch and 38 likes. Let's get Simon more likes. Yes, please. We got 122 people watching right now with 50 likes. Let's get it up to 100. All right. Hi, Simon. How much do you think globalization had to play in issues with the world today? Well, it has everything to do with it. Like, just think about what was happening. I mean, each individual country is going to operate within its own like independence. Like, I know the World Economic Forum is out there, okay, and I get it. Like, even my wife was asking me today. She was just like, okay, so what's this World Economic Forum thing, and what do they do? And I mean, it's just like, I mean, you could sit there and theorize on this for a long time and talk all about it, but I was just like, okay. I said, you notice how like all the cars around the world are all of a sudden just like simultaneously going to EV, electric? And you notice like how the scare tactics of like you'll own nothing and be happy and now it's difficult to buy a home, and how you'll eat bugs, right? And you got Tyson like investing in protein that's like insect production for protein. It's just like, all the things that are out there that are in the world that seem to simultaneously work. I mean, I think that's kind of like a vague way of looking at it and saying, okay, that's like the World Economic Forum at play, right? So I'm not scared. Like, to me, I look at that and I laugh at it. It's just like, to me, it's just like, okay, bro, it's just like you're like, you'll own nothing and be happy, and I'm like, like, I mean, I'm trying to buy this house, and after that, I really don't have anything. So not owning anything, I'm already there, bro. Like, that doesn't scare me. Like being without possession, I have very little fear of. That is not something like I fear. Right? And so you'll own nothing and be happy. I'm like, okay, man, just give me the happy part, man, because that would be perfect. Right? Because like I already strive for everything that I own and I'm trying to own, and everything that I go for. And if some dude's out there thinking that he's going to take it from me, he's going to have another thing coming. Right? I mean, I ain't got much, and it's not going to just get taken from me. So I don't worry about that. It's just like one of the last things on my mind. I mean, very little concern. So when other people are worried about the World Economic Forum causing their, pain and suffering and misery, I'm looking at it from an economic point of view that is going to be the reasonings that is actually going to cause the pain and misery. And that's probably because people are going to end up finding themselves within a nation that is no longer able to issue out any more debt, and find no way of being able to bring in new money into their system, and they will fight and die just like every other nation has throughout history has done. Like, there's very little doubt in my mind that'll happen, right? And you can see evidence of it at play and all over the place. But, it's easy to blame it on politics, because that's what ends up being like, the voice of it all, right? I mean, you got to have two people yelling at each other before they start fighting. And that's usually because, one's pissed off that the other one is there. So, I mean, it's kind of simple, really, when you think about it. All right. I missed the question? How much do we have globalization played into the world today? But I mean, I think that's probably like you have to think, like, the economy is the mechanical function of consciousness. And like I've said this before, like there's nothing here, like this cup that I have right here right now. Like the fact that it is right here in this truck with me and on this channel, it took literally like the efforts of just about every single person on the entire planet, including me, who put it right there. Right. And so when you think about it in this fashion, this is really deep. And this is, I'm not meaning to be like some kind of crystal gripping hippie guy when it comes to this stuff. But really, when you start thinking deep about how things are produced and distributed and purchased and how much effort and time and, you know, capabilities that it had to take for all this stuff to come through all the universe and forward for this thing to even get here. Like, it's incredible. Like, it's incredible to think about. Right. And so when I think about like globalization, right? It's in a much different fashion for me because I look at like everything as globalization. I think the fact that this, you know, that like I said, this cup is right here right now is because of like all the efforts that not only I put into putting it there, but the efforts that you have put in your life. Because if you hadn't done that, then all the things that had occurred around all of us wouldn't have put this cup here the way it is. It would have been something else, right? It would have been something completely different. But because we all did our thing throughout time, doing whatever it is, our efforts, our, you know, takings, whatever it is that happened, we end up here, you know, all together as an effort of this, right? So when I think about like things that are happening on a distant place so far away from me that it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with me, it does. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to sound like, you know, arrogant or cocky or something like, you know, full of myself, but it has something to do with you too. Right. So those wars, this cup, you know, this live stream that's happening right now, this is all like part of the total consciousness that is happening out there. And economics is the mechanical version of that. Right. There's stuff that's going on within our heads that are energies that are shared amongst all of us. Right. And again, it comes out in the form of economics. It comes out in the things that we produce and the purchases that we do and the things that we, you know, all the stuff, you know. 145 people with 66 likes. Come on, guys. Let's get that up to 100 likes here in the next 5 minutes. Okay. I'll answer my own question, Heider. That's funny. Dollars are used more than political power. Yeah. That's so funny, all-nighter. Hey Simon, have you gotten your silver YouTube channel plaque yet? If not, you deserve it, and for all the hard work you do. Yes, I do. Yes, I did. I got my silver plaque a little over a year ago. I got it shortly after July. In fact, I crossed my 100,000th subscriber over the 4th of July weekend. It was like a couple of days before the 4th of July, but it was that was pretty cool. My tiny house is dry because I built it. Yeah, that's right. Oh man. All right. Was headed to bed, bug. Caught this by chance. What's up, everyone? Hey, well, I'm glad you're here. Is it ma'am 2087? All right. I just sent 2 semi-loads of bees from Florida to California to pollinate the almonds. All this rain, I could lose my butt. Oh my gosh. Jesus, 2 semi-loads. That must be an incredible, that must be an incredible sight to see happen, man. Like, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just fascinated by it, but like, you know, I just tried to move one beehive around. It seemed like it was a pretty big deal, but like a whole 2 semi-loads? Safety meeting time, right on. Let's see. Calling 10 on the dice. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Yeah. Stock. Richard Cantillon wrote about this in 1720 to 1730. Yeah. And, you know, that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up and talk about is like, there's so many comments in here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all of them. But some of the things that I really wanted to talk about, especially if you're going to read this essay, like I left the link, I believe I left the link down in the description of the video here. If you're going to read this essay, there is literally 3 chapters in here And if you read those 3 chapters, like I'm almost thinking like we should like do live streams where we read these chapters together and talk about it, because the chapters of increase and decrease of money to the state are absolutely incredible. Like once you have gone through those, I'm trying to find them in here. Where is it? It seems like they were back here a little ways. But once you have gone through those particular chapters, it is just incredible. Like you really get a better understanding of how like the flow of money starts getting people into. See, it's almost like the same cycle, and you can see it like if you just look. I ain't got time to mess around with that. You can see it taking place just about like in every nation that has ever risen in power. Like whether you're talking about like all the way back to the Roman times, or if you're just talking like even even more recently, right? It really doesn't matter, because it's the same story that essentially takes place. It just happens in different fashions, and that is that there's new money that's coming in some new fashion, right? Now, Cantillon describes it with the silver mine, but really it can happen in all kinds of ways, and he describes it happening in all kinds of ways as well. One of them being debt issuance, right? And usually he says when this is the way that they're moving into new money, it isn't too much farther before they the end is near. So it's kind of funny that he talks about that too. Well, it's not funny at all, but it's interesting that he does bring that particular way up. But it's the same story, right? So the way it goes down is that the new money starts coming in. Once people get that new money, it's the same story no matter what. Everybody will tell the same. Even if you think about your neighbor getting a raise or something like that, what do? They go out and get a new car, right? Or they go on vacation, or they do something. They spend that money on some sort of luxury. They're like, man, I worked really hard. I've been doing this for a long time, and now here's my raise, and I finally get to take like advantage of this idea of all this new money, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to spend it on a bunch of luxuries. That right there is the downfall. Like it's not the downfall. It's the indication that there will soon be a downfall, because it's the dive into luxuries itself. Like all the rest of the economy is going to continue to perform well. Everybody's going to do awesome. Time's going to continue on, and things are going to look great. And people are going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? This dive into luxuries doesn't mean anything to me. It's doing awesome, right? And then one day, boom, it's over, right? And that's exactly how it happens when the money turns off, when the new money is no longer flowing in the fashion that it once had. And this is like what China is somewhat facing right now. I mean, you can see it happening. Their manufacturing base is really shrinking. This is due to the fact that less people around the world are purchasing from them. And if they don't have new money coming in, then what happens, right? They start to diminish. And that's exactly what has taken place. Now, China's going to get real pissed because they don't have the same luxuries as the United States, and going around saying, hey, why don't you all just buy my debt? Because who the hell wants to buy Chinese debt, right? Nobody does. And so now China's sitting in a position, they're like, okay, if we don't get new money coming in from manufacturing and we can't issue out new debt, how are we going to get new money, right? This is a very interesting question. It leads me to believe about the Belt and Road Initiative and how they have all these like infrastructure projects, ports, mines, highways, whatever it is, built all over the world within these poor nations like Africa, right? And they've lent them this money to build these things, and they did it in dollars, not some other currency. They did it mostly in dollars. Now, here's the interesting thing about it, is that if there was ever a time in which the dollar grew really, really strong, that would really benefit China, because these nations would not be able to pay those debts back. And then all those projects and everything that they've done, they would become property of China, right? And so now I think about that. If the dollar weakens, right, well, no problems, right? Because the dollar is on its way out, and China is becoming a manufacturer, or they're going to be the manufacturer, they're part of the BRICS or whatever, right? So if the dollar weakens and fails, then China takes over, right? But if the dollar grows stronger, China still wins. You see, like, this is how I feel that China has set it up. And I mean, now whether or not that's the actual plan, it seems to me that that's in play, right? Now, whether or not that actually takes place, we would have to see the dollar grow really strong in order for that to happen. So, doesn't really seem to be like what a lot of people think out there. They think the dollar is going to get weaker from here, so that whole scenario wouldn't play out, right? If the dollar goes weaker, then these nations will be able to pay their debts back, and then China, I guess their infrastructure project investments get paid back or whatever. I mean, it's just like everything's hunky dory or something. I mean, I don't know which one is going to play out. All right, the four horsemen of the economics: Cantillon, Gresham, Driffins, and Howdy Doody. The U.S. charges export tax for avocados and going to Mexico, and charges import tax to import avocados from Mexico. Well, see, this is the thing. Like, there's all those things that you see. I don't mean to skip over all these great comments in here, but I'm just gonna cruise down to the bottom just to see how they're. Okay, so there's a few of you in there. So this is the funny thing about like anytime you ever see government involvement in anything, that's because the economy has grown to the condition that it is in. Right? I mean, that's what's like really blows like it's hard. It blows like the political part of things like completely out of my view, right? Because now I look at it as politics interacting with the economy and not the politics guiding the economy or anything like that. There's things that happen like the lockdowns. Let's take the lockdowns for example, right? So this is an unnatural occurrence that took place within the economy. It was like something that you just wouldn't happen, right? I mean, never in a natural occurrence would this like happen on a grand scale of this magnitude. So the economic forces that started to take place when that happened was going to be well known amongst the economists out there who understood how supply chain breakdowns really work and what would occur from that. They knew it would create the inflationary scenario. They knew it. They knew that printing all the money wouldn't necessarily do it because quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, 4 failed to prove that they would get inflation that they would look for after printing up so much money. So they knew that they were going to have to do something a little bit different. And that simultaneous lockdown of the economy around the world is totally what did it. Like if that was a total political affair, it was done simultaneously amongst the entire world. It was, I mean, all done in an effort to save lives, right? I mean, so, it had a great excuse, problem, reaction, solution, no problems, Anyhow, but this is like, I guess, a political way of looking at it. But what was really taking place there is that the whole event was allowing an economic force to take place. And that was the bullwhip effect, right? When you have that supply chain breakdown, when you have a limitation in availability out there, you're going to have this perception change on what it is that prices should be or availability is going to be and stuff like that. And then you have this real crazy obscurity that starts to happen. And that was well known that it was going to take place. Like anybody who knew about a supply gap knew that there was going to be like chaos coming from that. And it's easy to blame that on politics because of what they did with the lockdowns, but it's difficult to understand the economic ramifications and what's going to happen because of that lockdown, right? People are like, it's their fault. Yeah, okay, great. Now, what's going to occur, right? Because, yeah, it's their fault. They put the hole in the boat. Okay, screw those people. All right, now what? Right? Because that's really what's going on here is that they might have put the hole in the boat or whatever, like put that gap in production, but what's going to occur from that? Like, this is really where like I feel that this channel is really focused in on that, because when I saw what was happening within lumber, and I'm thinking, well, if lumber could come down all the way to its pre-COVID prices, like pre-COVID prices, like I mean, it was down like even still today, it's cheaper than it was back in 2018, right? So when I think about that, like, how is it that lumber could find its normal price again while everything is getting out of control, right? All the stuff out there is going up in price, but lumber is staying still, right? So somehow lumber doesn't experience inflation while everything else does. But if it's destruction of the dollar, then it needs to be in lumber as well. So if it is destruction of the dollar and lumber is experiencing this just as well, that means there's a major deflation taking place within lumber at the same simultaneous time, keeping it elevated at that 500 per thousand, which is the price that we experienced back in 2018. Does that make sense? Or does it just seem like it was a supply chain issue and how lumber is a domestic, well-established, well-functioning, hard-working people who put that thing together and can have it back and functioning in no time at all? Like, lumber is easy in the United States. It's hard, it's fiber, it's big, it's heavy, you need equipment and all kinds of stuff. We know how to make lumber. We do a lot of it. We're good at it. All right. And so reestablishing lumber within the supply chain was like almost instantaneous. It looked like nothing at all. And the demand for it had pretty much collapsed as, the interest rates were high and nobody wanted to borrow money to build decks and fences and gazebos anymore. All right, gosh, we got 175 people up in here. This is doing great. I love it. All right, what do y'all want to talk about? What do you want me to cover? Simon, will you get your Camaro? Is what will come soon. Well, I mean, I hope so, right? I mean, my dream of a Camaro is a lot of fun. I look at them when they drive by and I think about myself driving them and stuff like that. Like, I really would love to have that Camaro, right? I mean, it's something in me. But it's a dive into luxuries, and I got so many important things that I need to take care of that, like, the Camaro is kind of back there on the list a long ways, And, I dream of it someday, I mean, if I happen to do something real smart and hit it big and, I don't know, make the right set of videos or something, I don't know. Yeah, it might be cool to get it, I could take the sponsorships and just go get it, I guess, but, I don't like doing sponsors. So, yeah, I'm going to have to work for it, and I'll figure out how to do it. And when I do, it's going to be awesome, All right. Yui, do you still believe we are going to feel pain from the bullwhip effect? If so, where are you seeing it take place? Well, okay, that's a great question, and yes, I do. The only thing is that you're not going to see it at the same time, right? Because just like lumber, you're going to see, or eggs, or anything else out there, you're going to see all these things hitting at different times. So it's like you got to recognize the individual, industries being hit by the bullwhip effect. I mean, you think about it right now. I mean, I don't go car shopping, although I would really love to go car shopping for the Camaro. But I'm hearing and reading about how used and new car prices are starting to find their way down, right? Now, are they still elevated in price? Yeah, I hear they're still quite expensive, but they're not nearly as expensive as they once were. And so now that's something interesting to think about since, really they haven't pulled that much money out of the system. So is the bullwhip effect starting to land in cars? Maybe, right? Totally saw it within pork and chicken. Right? These two industries got hit hard, right? So during the pandemic, the demand for pork was extremely elevated, pork and chicken. All of a sudden, there was all this investment that went into producing all this pork, or all this production that went in, right? All of a sudden, all this stuff comes online, and people aren't willing to buy as much of it at the time. And now there's plenty of it, so they're not scared. And the price of it starts to collapse, and they start shutting down chicken production facilities and pork production, right? So this is the bullwhip effect. I mean, you can see it. And now, again, like, people will blame this on politics. Like, there's political things that are happening out there. They're talking about, like, shutting down, like, the inefficient chicken processors for the more efficient ones. Okay, that's cool, but they wouldn't shut down the inefficient ones, too, if there was a demand for chicken at the time, right? So there was less demand for chicken. That was due to the fact that the over demand that was non-existent, right? That overwhelming consumer demand, then these smaller chicken facilities wouldn't be shutting down as much. But that demand didn't exist, right? So now they are devastated by this, and they're just no longer going to exist. So, you just kind of have to see how that process takes place. I mean, is every single thing going to experience a dramatic bullwhip effect? Probably not, right? I mean, you can see it actually happen in lumber where it shot up to 17, dropped down to like 300 per thousand, went back up to 1,200 per thousand, and then now it's back here at 500 per thousand, and boom, 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 right? I mean, is that going to happen to like eggs? I don't think so. Maybe. I mean, but I think, like, the big deal with eggs is probably pretty much done, right? But it very well could be that, like, during the time when all of a sudden the eggs started flooding onto the market and you got low price of eggs taking place and all the, cost that goes into egg production now has some egg farmers out there looking at it going, I can't take out my loans at these higher interest rates. We went for an entire year, but now we can't make it. We're done. Like, unless these egg prices go up, and if they're not producing, then what happens to egg prices? Now, that is like a hypothetical situation maybe coming. Who knows? Egg prices seem to be pretty cheap, and that's hard to deal with in an expensive environment. So if you're an egg producer, you're probably not doing too well. Just a guess, but time will tell. I don't know. Does that kind of like, I don't know. Does that make sense? All right. Lumber is considered discretionary spending. No, it's not. See, Miss April, it's not though. See, it's inelastic. It's elastic and inelastic demand, right? Because discretionary spending, I mean, I guess it is in the sense that if you decide to build a house or not, right? But once the moment is decided that you do want to build a house, then it's inelastic at that point, right? Because the contractor's contracted to pay to build that thing, and if the material is unavailable, it's not discretionary at that point. Like, he can't sit around and wait, for things to get cheaper. I mean, well, maybe you could if he went to the homeowners and said, "Hey, man, we need to postpone this," and they were cool enough. But if they're like, "Nope, you got to build it," right, and he's contracted to do it, then he has to come up with that lumber, no matter what. Like, no matter what. And that's inelastic demand. So, and there was quite a few cases of that taking place, and that's really what drove the lumber prices up to 1,700 per thousand. Otherwise, nobody in their right mind would have bought it. Not at that price. I mean, $13 for a 2x4 8 stud. It's like I don't even like the fact that they're at $4 a piece right now, but to think that they were at $13.50, that is just like insane. And nobody would pay that unless they were absolutely required to do it, unless they absolutely had to. So smart man, thanks. All right. Bedtime night, y'all. All right. You have a good one. It depends on the situation. Good night, man. What is the likelihood of bail-ins? I doubt it. I mean, like, to be honest, like, a lot of this stuff that you see that is really kind of fear tactics about the banking system. Here's the here's the deal. Like, after I started, like, there was a time that I would have been like, get your money out of the bank right now, get it all into silver, get your guns, get your bullets, get your Bitcoin, load up on all the canned goods that you can, and stand out front of your driveway with your, 12 gauge and just, be cool, right? I don't know. Like, that was kind of like my attitude. Like, literally, that was my attitude. I was one of those, right? And so, I mean, I still kind of am in a lot of ways. Anyhow, so when I started studying a lot of the stuff when I was diving into the Fed and following the money, right, I realized that the Federal Reserve is quite aware of a lot of things that are out there, right, including the great financial crisis that everybody says caught the Federal Reserve off guard. I don't think so. Like, just Ben Bernanke's speech talking about deflation in 2002 and how to cure deflation and describes quantitative easing almost to a T 6 years before it happens. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, they totally caught him off guard. Didn't know it coming, man. They had a great knee jerk reaction to that. I mean, come on, right? So what I'm starting to realize studying the Federal Reserve and a lot of the stuff is that they have done a great job of planning a lot of the crisis that is going to happen, right? And what I guess I mean by that is that if a particular crisis takes place, or if the economy starts falling into crisis, they have plans that nobody has discussed or talked about. Things that are like written down in secrecy that can only be used in unusual and exigent circumstances, right? And then these plans all of a sudden pop up. Like, oh, hey, you know how you all thought that you were going to have these giant bank runs? Well, guess what? We got the Bank Term Funding Program. Pah! Right? See, this is like, this is how they work. And I didn't know that they were going to drop the Bank Term Funding Program But I knew within their statements, and I can't really find them when I go back and look, but maybe it was just a couple of them that I had read or something. But even within their own statements, I heard that they would have tools that they could deploy. And I never understood that. I was just like, well, what are those? Like, I mean, you got tools that you can deploy. What does that mean? You know, it was just like, but that's what the Federal Reserve was saying. You know, it's just like, so if we come into a crisis, we have these tools that nobody knows about that we can deploy. And I said, okay. So when people asked me, then, are you worried about a bank run and getting your money out of the bank? I was like, no. And they were like, why? And I'm like, because the Federal Reserve has lifeboats. And they're like, really, you're going to depend on a lifeboat? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I am, because that's what the Federal Reserve is planning to use, right? And when we saw Silicon Valley Bank start to fail and the contagion start to take place, boom, right? They didn't fix it, right? They fixed it, but they didn't fix it. But this is all I guess I'm getting at is they had a plan for it, right? And so I wasn't nervous about that. I wasn't worried about a bank run. I wasn't worried about keeping my cash in the bank. And I wasn't worried that the Fed didn't have a plan to deal with it. And so while everybody else was like on YouTube scaring the piss out of you, making a ton of money off of their video, being a fear porn monger, right? Telling you to get your money out of the bank and then you didn't even know what to do with it. So you just had to go put it right back in there, right? Because you got bills to pay, just like everybody else does. You know, I mean, it was just like I wasn't scared. I walk through this world with confidence. Like I don't like I'm not sitting around thinking that some politician's after me or that some new world order's after me or that, the economy is going to destroy me because like what are they going to take, right? I mean, I guess they could take the house, that would suck, but after that, what are they going to take from me? I don't really have anything to take, So I mean, I'm pretty confident in what I got, and what I got going on in the things that I have studied and the research that I've done. Like at this point, now that I know that Jerome Powell is emitting the average inflation rate over time and that they're not going for the 2% target, I'll go toe to toe with just about any economist out there because they just about all got it wrong, every one of them. And I don't mean to be like bragging that up, but I mean, it's just like as much time and effort as I have to try and put out the information about average inflation rate over time being the real monetary policy and hardly getting any notice on YouTube except for the loyal fans like you guys are, right? I mean, it was just like, I don't, whatever, it's just like, I don't need any of that anymore. I know what I got going on. And I will, like I said, I will just about debate any economist on this whole average inflation rate on the coming when it comes to the monetary policy strategies. And again, I don't mean to sound cocky about it, but it was like it's been a lot of work that I put into this, right? Like I feel somewhat validated within all of it when Jerome Powell said that, and it was just like, no, we're not. That's not what I said. We're not going for a 2% target. That's not it. Yeah, we're going for a 2% over time. Whatever the hell that means, and we already know that it doesn't mean shit, right? Actually, we know what it means. It means that there's a 2% average inflation some point in the past and that they're looking for that average inflation rate to meet some sort of inflection point here in the future. And if they meet that inflection point at the same time that inflation is actually at 2%, they could switch back over to targeting inflation and look at forward average inflation rate from that point on. That's their plan. Anybody else who sees it any way different is wrong, right? That's what it is. That's the monetary policy strategy, is that for those of you who didn't get it, let me explain that one more time, what's happening with the average inflation rate, because it's not made up. It is not arbitrary to the Fed. It's not whenever they decide that it's going to be there, right? What average inflation here, in fact, I think I got it here on my computer. Let me see. All right. In seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are not tying ourselves to any particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Now, that was stated by Jerome Powell. That was on a speech given August of 2020. Now, this is coming from the Richmond Fed, and it says this: talking about the average inflation rate, it says they do not define the window of time over which it would be looking back on to assess the program towards its goal. All right, so basically, they don't have a metric for figuring out this average inflation rate. Now, this is where it's important. By looking back far enough, it is possible to identify starting dates where average inflation rate through the present day has come in exactly at target. Right? So what they're saying is if you take today's present day inflation and you start looking backwards far enough, right, that there is a moment in time that you will find that on this day, there was an average inflation rate of 2%. So let me read this. By looking back far enough, it is possible to identify starting dates where average inflation through the present day has come in exactly at target. For example, when considering inflation from October of 2008 through August of 2023, headline PCE inflation averaged about 2% per year on average, right on target. So this is important to understand because this is coming directly from the Federal Reserve. When all the rest of the people out there start telling you that they're just going to pick a day, blah, 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 right? That's not what's happening, right? There is a day from right here, present day, looking backward. There was a day that there was a 2% average inflation rate. It was about 15 years ago. Now, this is important to understand because if inflation stays elevated, that date starts to get closer to us. See, think about it. Before there was inflation, there was a shortfall from the 2% target. The Fed failed to achieve their inflation mandate, right? Well, I don't know about mandate. They failed to achieve their inflation target of 2%, right? They were under that. So if they were to sit on that day, right, where it's running under 2%, well, let's just say they had it running under 2%, they got it up to 2%, they're sitting there, they're looking back at a trough of failing to achieve 2% inflation for the last decade or more. In fact, they would have to look back so damn far they can't even find where they even achieved a 2% average inflation rate. So now we have inflation taken off, right? So now we're incorporate this new inflation that we are experiencing over the last few years into all this shortfall of inflation. And after we have experienced it all the way to today, like all this rise of inflation coming down, boom, from right here, looking back 15 years on that day, somewhere back there, there's an average inflation rate of 2%. Now, if inflation continues to run elevated, right, above the 2% inflation target, that average inflation rate of 2% will continue to move closer to the current date of present, right, as time goes on. Does this make sense? All right. So now what ends up happening is that average inflation rate will eventually reach a point in time that it cannot get any closer to the present day because there is no time in between that date and the current date that there could possibly be an average inflation rate of 2%. It starts moving up. And now you have to start moving back out onto the timeline to find the average inflation rate of 2% again. Now, I know this stuff is really complicated, right? But it's taken me a while to figure this out. But this is what's going on. Because now when this 2% average inflation rate that has now moved closer to the current present date as the inflation stays elevated, drawing this average inflation rate closer, it reaches that inflection point. At that time, the Federal Reserve is going to attempt, in my opinion, to hit the 2% or have inflation landing at 2% at that exact moment. At this moment of inflection. When that happens, the Federal Reserve could switch to inflation targeting again, right? Trying to maintain this 2%, and then have forward-looking average inflation rate. And if you don't believe that there's such thing as a forward-looking average inflation, just go to the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. This is an economic letter written January 10th, 2022, right? Average inflation targeting in the financial crisis recovery, right? I don't know if you can see that. And in that paper, they talk all about forward-looking average inflation, right? And I don't even know if I quite understand it. So I'm going to do a video on it at some point in the future once we get closer to that inflection point, because that's what we're going to switch over to. And that's what we're going to be like. That's going to be the new monetary policy. Right now, it's backward looking, right? But soon it's going to be forward looking. Who else is telling you this stuff, right? Who else is giving you this kind of information other than the uneducated economist? This is why the people who have joined my channel love what they are learning from it, right? Because there's nobody else who's bringing this kind of information to you. And this is coming directly from the Fed. This isn't some blogger out there, saying like, hey, go and share my information, right? I mean, I'm telling you to share my information too. But all I guess I'm getting at is that I'm presenting you information that's coming directly from the Federal Reserve and what it is that they're doing for their monetary policy, right? And I mean, yeah, it is interpreted by me, and a lot of this is like my opinions and stuff like that. But what I've always said to you is just like, man, the links are down in the description. Go and take it for yourself, And that's like, I think that's what's really making this channel more unique than just about anybody else's, is that like us as working class individuals who then have this kind of information, then have now firsthand access, real-time access, boots on the ground access to this information that all these bigwigs are looking for. right? They're looking for data that we live in real time. Most of us just don't recognize it because we don't understand the macroeconomics of it all. Once we have a good understanding of that and we're out there operating in our daily jobs, man, we have right now information. Like I can tell you right now that things are really bad in the retail space, right? I work a retail job. I had a contractor who normally is like a very active builder within the framing, like framing homes. It is a downtime of the season. I mean, it's, February, so like this is usually the slow time. But he actually said to me on the way out the door, "Simon, find me a job." And I'm like, "Whoa, bro, you don't have any?" He goes, "I haven't had any work for like a month." All right, he hasn't worked. You can't find anything to frame, like no framers needed. I got too many framers around here or something. All right. Here's another one. A guy who's doing a remodel on a couple of buildings, commercial buildings, right? And so like it's kind of like he's just kind of working on them. And just like anything, you hire subcontractors at times when you need them. So he calls up the local electrician. He says, "Hey, it's kind of a bigger name." And he says to him, he goes, "Hey man, I'm going to need a scheduled electrician." And the guy says, "What time do you need him?" Right? Not what day, not like, how, whatever. Like, we got a guy available right now for you. Like, that's unheard of. We haven't seen that in a very long time. I'm trying to think of like another one that I heard of just recently. Those were just two that just popped up like back to back earlier today, and I thought that was kind of an interesting one. But anyhow. But anyway, that's real-time information. I mean, for me, I'm like, wow, I haven't heard of that happening in a long time. I mean, the demand for framers was just so, so extreme. Like I told people, it was just like, don't even bother asking. I couldn't tell you like anybody. Everybody's so busy. You got like a year to wait. But now it's starting to turn up. Like, people are looking for, people are saying that the phone is not ringing as much and there's less jobs coming in. And I can tell you down at the, lumber yard, the projects, like the construction projects, they seem to be going, like, as far as like there's a few of those that are happening, but as the retail, like people who are just doing like casual projects, building the fence, building the decks, doing stuff like that, it is very, very slow. Like those people are very quiet right now. Let's see here, tools. Do you have any thoughts on how the U.S. and the West in large could exit the death spiral of perpetual debt and inflation? They, the Fed, acknowledge it is not sustainable, so what is the alternatives? So what you're going to have to do is, number one, don't buy any luxuries. That's everybody. I don't care how much money you make. Every single person in the United States has to stop buying luxuries. Now, they have to go and start fixing things that are broken, right? To use those instead, because there's going to be nothing new coming in. We have to start producing something that other people are going to buy, which is going to be very difficult because our standard of living is so high, it's going to be hard to produce anything that anybody else is going to want, right? Or they might want it, but they're not going to be able to afford it. So we have to figure out something that other people are going to buy. We have to work incredibly hard, like long hours to earn that money to pay back all this debt. And then we consume very little, right? Reuse all the stuff, fix all the stuff, not buy anything new. And we do that for generations. Like literally generations of people have to have this exact same mentality of busting their ass, working hard, 12, 18 hours a day, paying off all this past debt that we have taken out because we got all the interest to pay too, right? And we do that for a few generations till we eventually break even. And then we might actually have like a pretty decent manufacturing base by that point, right? And, be able to produce stuff that other people around the world want. That's what it's going to take. The alternative to that is to try and keep the debts flowing, keep the money monopoly going, right? The alternative to that is pain and misery. Which one do you think it's going to be? So we got pain and misery. The like cold day in hell, right? The chances that we're all gonna go hard working and not buy into luxuries, right? That'll never happen, right? So that one's out the door, right? The fixing the problem, that ain't gonna there ain't no fixing the problem, right? And so what is it gonna be? More debt issuance, or it's gonna be pain and misery? That's it. That's all we got. And the Federal Reserve is right. It's on an unsustainable path. This is the reason why I am so adamant about people getting into gold and silver. If you are not holding some sort of gold and silver, you are not prepared for that moment at all. Now, whether or not it's going to come in our generation next year, 50 years, I don't know. I could not tell you, because if you asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago how long the dollar was going to last, I would have said it would have been over by now, right? So it's not to me, it's not a matter of like the timing of it. It's just like, be prepared for it at any given time. You'd much rather be 10 years, a generation too early, right? I mean, being able to hand that off to the next generation and say, okay, this is the reason why you're holding it, because at some point this unsustainable debt is going to collapse and you're going to be in a really tough position, right? And if you do not have this, you are going to have nothing, right? Because there is no debt-based asset out there. If it's on paper, it's not going to be worth anything, right? And that's a scary moment to think of, right? And I don't believe that's like imminent, like, right? I mean, it is in time, I guess, in the future at some point long out there, but I don't think it's like, imminent threat, like it's going to happen here in the next, by the next election, or I don't think that, so. You guys having fun? We got a bunch of you out here, 173. This is amazing. Let's get some more likes. 128 likes, and we have 173 people. Let's get it up to 150 likes here in the next 5 minutes. Zach, maybe debt jubilee. Nah, I don't believe in debt jubilees. I don't think that's going to happen. Austerity, debt jubilee, default, or inflation. My bet's on inflation. You have mine too, all-nighter. I mean, that's the inevitability of a fiat currency. Now, understanding the fiat currency, in that what inflation is the expansion of money and credit. Okay, so if we can hold that ball by itself, right, and then start looking at other parts of the economy and like the way prices move and stuff, separate from the ball of money and credit, then we can really start understanding like supply demand issues, right? Because now people are going to have a very difficult time understanding why the prices are going to be moving down, or at least the inflation is going to be dissipating, even though the money really hasn't left the system yet, right? There's only pulled like what, $1 trillion out. I mean, I know that's a lot of money, but considering how much they put into the active pool of like money that's supposed to be out there, pulling $1 trillion out really isn't that much money. And so really it shouldn't be bringing inflation down when you consider that all this money that had been created since the pandemic, if there's no inflation, or the inflation is coming down, then all that money was almost inconsequential to the economy, right? I mean, this is like it doesn't make sense. Like, you can't look at it that way. It is the expansion of money and credit, but prices are supply and demand. And so when you have a supply chain breakdown, you are going to have supply demand imbalances. All that money printing was definitely the gold machine, right? The credible threat. Now, it does inject money into the system through stimulus, so there is some of that money injection. But if you didn't have the supply chain breakdown at the same time, that would have been a flash in the pan. That money would have gone right out and partied away, and it would have been gone, and nobody would have noticed it, right? But because it happened during that same time that there was a lockdown and that supply chain breakdown and the gap in manufacturing, they zapped inventory, and there was nothing that came in to replace it. And that's what really just drove all the craziness that we ended up seeing. It wasn't the money printing alone, right? I mean, it was, I mean, you can't say that it wasn't just the money, like, you can't say that a money printer didn't do it, right? I mean, that's like, that doesn't make sense either. But it's to understand how it is that like that money ended up causing the inflation within the economy due to the efforts that were happening at the exact same time, right? It was a force feeding of inflation that came into the economy. It was like they had to have it happen. If they didn't do that, the Federal Reserve was going to fail. Like the low interest rate environment of having like low neutral interest rate and the Fed funds rate near the lower bound of zero put them in a position in which that they were not going to do very well as far as operating their monetary policy. They were like literally like out of amp. They were done. They were like, okay, man, like we're gonna have to come into some like real serious like changes to the way we operate our monetary policy. And that's literally how they switched into like this quantitative easing and this perception change and like all this like talking on the mainstream media and all this stuff. Like before the great financial crisis, the Fed hardly talked. Like they barely said anything to anyone ever, right? Come out with these really confusing statements. Greenspan would like, I mean, I think he would like just take pleasure in writing out the most confusing statements he could ever possibly have come up with. And this is the way that the Federal Reserve typically operated. But after quantitative easing of the great financial crisis in 1, 2, 3, and 4, they needed the Fed's words out there to put the perception into the people. And this is what started guiding the market, started guiding the economy, started guiding things. I mean, when they openly admit that the special purpose vehicles of the corporate debt lending facility pretty much got these corporations to finance themselves before the special purpose vehicles were even set up to do it. Like just the idea of them setting up that entity was enough to like bail out all these corporations. And this is what blows me away again. It was just like, how come nobody talks about that? How come nobody says all these corporations got bailed out during the pandemic with those special purpose vehicles and the threat that came from it? Because they didn't even buy any. Like the special purpose vehicles were set up to buy corporate debt. Just the idea of them being there was enough to drive the markets into that corporate debt, thinking that they were going to front run the Fed. It was incredible. It was like, how the hell did they pull that off so exquisitely? Like, I mean, that was like truly amazing. And then what gets me about it is like it's a great credible threat too, because if the market didn't step in to buy it, they had hundreds of billions of dollars to do it. So no matter what, the bailout was going to happen to those corporations, no matter what. It was like, man, how in the world do they do that? Like it was incredible, you know? And I would love to call them out. And it's just like I would love to get the Fed to sit down. And it's like, how do you guys plan that thing? Like, how do you guys do that? Because that was incredible. To see you guys actually pull that thing off, set this thing up, fund it with hundreds of billions of dollars, put out the news articles, the credible threats, got all the YouTubers to talk about it too. I was one of them. I mean, so and then didn't even need it. Didn't even need it. Just the fact that it was there was all that it took. It was incredible. You know? Yep, what everyone else is doing to the opposite. Good call, Grant. I forgot that one. All right. Let's see here. Step on the gas. All right. Sounds like government's plan. Maybe the 2% average is calculated like the CPI. I don't think so. I think that the average I think I got it dialed in. I think from the things that I have read from, I mean, I could be wrong. I can be 100% wrong, right? But I think from the things that I have read, the pieces that I have put together, the documents, like, I mean, this is spanning years, years of documents, right? Of them talking about this. And I'm sure there's other ones out there that I'm missing, like, but this is what I have found. And I'm pretty sure I've dialed it in to what it is that they're looking at. They got backward-looking average inflation and forward-looking average inflation. And right now, the backward-looking average inflation is trying to draw that 2% average inflation closer to the state, just like I had described. Once they hit that inflection point, it's going to switch over to forward-looking average inflation. And when that comes, I'm going to talk about it because I got the document right here. I just need to understand what average inflation rate is. Excuse me. God, I'm sorry, guys. In a forward-looking fashion. Oh, man. I get to talking and I just get like, I don't know. I start feeling like I get the hiccups or something. All right, oops. All right, Ukraine. Where's next? Iran. All right, IP manipulation. All right, Taiwan also possible. All BS. Bottom line, we all should have went all in on meta and yeah. All right, the playbook is well known. Make my boil and make my boil in you as soprint? Huh. As data analysis, that is called make up the numbers. Worldwide, the Fed is full of PhD attorneys all about CYA. Hey, right on. Look at that. We got a member to the channel. Thank you so much. What is that? Sworn Deep? Swarm Deep, Aurora. Jeez, I just have a hell of a time talking sometimes. Thank you so much for joining the channel, man. I really appreciate it. You're gonna find a lot of value within the membership. Especially these live streams that we do. I mean, if you're enjoying this live stream, you should see what the live streams are like when I really break down some of the stuff and we get to talking about, some of these deeper topics coming from the Federal Reserve. These live streams, like the private, well, I shouldn't say private, they're members only. Like anybody can join them. They're $1. It's $1 to you. It's everything to me, right? So for just $1, you get to join these live streams, and it's broken down into a much tighter community of people who are really serious about understanding this information. Not only that, but then there's comments within there that are just absolutely brilliant. Like this, I mean, far better than what I'm even coming up with. So it's a community of people who are not only like dedicated to trying to figure out what it is this monetary policy strategy is, but they're sharing information in a way that is really unique, I think, just to this channel. And you're going to find that the past videos that we have done are going to be very informative. They're full of a lot of like information, just like what I was reading from the Federal Reserve. It's good stuff, right? And I mean, you can just ask or look at some of the comments coming from some of the members that are out there and how much value they are finding within it too. Like I said, it's $1 a month. I mean, it's like $12 a year, right? $120 for a decade, $480 for 40 years of dedicated information that's coming from me. It's just like, I don't know. Like, to me, I'm really excited about that channel membership. So I really appreciate you joining. Forward-looking would leave the option for speculation open a bit more, wouldn't it? It certainly would, right? I mean, it certainly would, because now forward-looking average inflation rate would now have, I believe, like a lot more of like, R star kind of idea, because like the neutral interest rate is a lot of using what forward projection average or what forward projecting inflation expectation would be, right? Because now this is going to have a lot to do with it, like, because forward-looking inflation expectation, like that may not be what the inflation is once you get there. It's the expectation of what the inflation is going to be from present day conditions that you are experiencing now. So this is now getting very confusing, and that's when they came up with this formula called R star to try and figure out where the neutral interest rate is. And with that understanding of where the neutral interest rate is and the idea of where inflation is going to be in the future, they come up with this formula for it. I don't know. Anyhow, that's going to be a much different topic. It's going to be much deeper and more technical, because I think, like, when I was reading through what forward-looking average inflation rate is, there is so much to try and digest into how that is that they are going to view that, and then try to, like, I don't know, communicate that to the markets out there. It's just like I'm still trying to figure out what it is that's going to look like, because I have a funny feeling that the information that is going to be what I believe is going to be taking place is not going to be what they're saying. Right? I mean, it's going to become something completely different. But that's part of the monetary policy strategy, is to get the markets to perceive something in a particular way. So that's why it's important to understand this, right? Because here they are, they're talking about it. This hasn't occurred yet, but now they have the plan already set up, or at least an idea of what that could look like, right? And so once we internalize that, when it starts to take place, it'll be obvious to us. We'll be like, this is what's happening, right? And so we won't have to question it. Well, everybody else will be like, nope, they screwed up again, and we'll be like, yeah, even though they talked about it 3 years ago or whatever. Sworn Deep. Oh, welcome, Sworn Deep. Thank you, All Nighter. As long as bondholders still have appetite for more U.S. debt, the system works. Yeah, and that's really the truth of it all, you know. And it's just like the U.S. Treasury, as long as there is a demand for it, and as much as people say that the other nations out there are getting out of U.S. debt, there's two ways of looking at that. They're either getting out of U.S. debt, meaning they don't want to hold on to the U.S. treasuries, or it means that they're trying to get in cash, and selling off of the U.S. treasuries is the fastest way to cash. Because a lot of these nations have debts that are due in dollars. And the only way to get those dollars is to either sell something to the United States, but if the United States isn't buying it, then they have to take out their own debts, in dollars, right? They have to come up with dollars in order to pay those debts back. So, don't even know you are Nighthawk. I didn't even know you were a Nighthawk, UE. I'm really not. Usually I'm kind of in bed by now, but for whatever reason, I was kind of, I don't know. Maybe I was lit up because people told me I was delusional. And so I was like, well, okay, let's go talk about it. All right. Do you track the semiconductor industry and its economics? I mean, probably not as much as I should. I mean, outside of some of the things that I was reading and, knowing that, like, knowing when there was a chip shortage and what I knew about the bullwhip effect, I knew it was only a matter of time before there would end up being like an oversupply of chips. And I'm reading articles now how the competition against China for building a lot of these chips is so intense. Like they know now that the amount of production that is going into the market it's going to create a glut. Like it's almost obvious at this point. But now, what I find interesting about this whole theory then I don't know if this is exactly right, but I'm going to kind of describe it at least from the way I kind of heard it is that China is like loading up on building these particular manufacturing plants of these chip manufacturers, and like they know that it's going to be devastating, but they're going to go ahead and just make as many of these things as they can, right, and just flood the market with them. Because what's going to end up happening is that as the devastation and bankruptcies and shutdowns begin to take place amongst all these chip manufacturers who have like all over invested into what they thought was going to be a short supply, which we all know the bullwhip effect now. So as these things start to fail, it's going to leave more chip manufacturers in China, even though they're going to have a bunch that fail too, but they're going to have the majority of them going. So when they ramps back up again, they will be in the market with the most producers, even though they may even have the most failures at the same time. Anyhow, thought that was kind of a little interesting story. I don't know if that's exactly going to play out the way like that I read about it, but I thought, dang man, that's like a hell of a way to play that game. All right, impossible. I don't know what they were talking about. Okay, agreed, man. Hopefully we don't end up like Germany. Um, I don't know in what sense you're referring to, but I mean, everything it's all inevitable. It's just like it's just a matter of time. The economic forces are out there. You got to think like whatever it is that's going on right now, it's an action against what is like the inevitable economic force. Right? And so we really should have failed, many times, but because of the political environment and what they did, right, they were able to continue on the system, but they didn't really like fix anything, right? What they did is postpone what will be an inevitable collapse. And so instead of dealing with the collapse a long time ago and felt the pain from that, we're going to deal with the collapse in the future and we're going to feel a suffering pain from it, right? Not just a painful experience, but a suffering, painful, lasting experience from it. And so this is the problem with when people say, like, politics getting involved. Yeah, they do, but it's not like they're fixing anything. They're postponing what is going to happen, right? And these economic forces, they're just building more pressure. So it's not like it gone away, right? They're just participating in what is going to be eventually something that's going to happen. And they are actively participating in that. If the economy wasn't as big as it was, then they would never be able to be there to do it. That's something to think about. Like, I mean, if the if it wasn't big enough, there wasn't enough power, if there wasn't enough money going around there, then these people who don't produce anything, who don't serve any kind of real purpose, right, wouldn't be able to take from the producers out there. And that's really what it comes down to. It's like, you know, once the economy gets to a certain size, then the political, like, people can come in and it's just like, oh, hey, we serve a purpose here, with all your hard work and dedication for being like an industrious people. Silver is dropping a lot. Why is that? While gold is pretty steady. Silver is like a volatile little cousin of gold. So it's going to jump all over the place. When it takes off and it starts to really ramp up and start getting some price increases, you'll see it like way outperform gold. Like, who knows how far it'll go. But I don't really think about that much. I just look at silver as an insurance policy. And when it goes down, take that as a gift and, take advantage of that and go and buy a few more ounces if you can. The idea of like, silver investment making you $1 million or something like that, like, I don't look at it that way at all. And so when price fluctuations take place, I don't really care. Like, I just, like, to me, it's like a very inconsequential. Like, there was a time that I was glued to every price, every cent that it moved, man. I was just like calculating how many ounces I had to how much the spot price was, and I knew at any given moment like exactly how much money I would have in weight value or whatever. I don't do that anymore. Like, I don't even know exactly how many ounces I have. I just, like, every once in a while I'll pick some up and I'll put it in the pile with the rest of them, and I don't really think about it. Same thing with cryptocurrencies. I don't really think about like how much money I have in cryptocurrencies. My biggest position that I have out of like anything, unless you talk in the equity in the house, my biggest position that I hold is in cryptocurrencies, mostly Bitcoin. And so that's kind of interesting to think. Like, I don't even talk that much about cryptocurrencies, yet my biggest position is cryptocurrencies. It's more than stocks, more than gold and silver, more than anything. I have more in cryptocurrencies. But yet I hardly ever talk about it. But that should say something about like, my faith in like the fiat currency system. Like, I have none. However, since studying like I do about the Federal Reserve and trying to figure out how to best position myself, I realize that, a lot of the stuff that we are finding out there coming from the so-called experts, I think it's not like they got it wrong. I wouldn't say that by any means. Like, there's nothing they say is wrong, but I don't think they key in on the appropriate stuff. Like, I don't like, especially, I guess everybody thinks that their information is gold, but I really think mine's unique. And, there's a few other guys out there who put out some pretty unique information that's unlike anybody else's. I think Jeff Snyder's one of them. I haven't listened to Jeff Snyder in a very long time, but definitely listening to him on stage, he's got the best information. That euro dollar strategy stuff that he has is just like incredible. And Brent Snyder too, or Brent Johnson, I'm sorry, Brent Johnson as well with the milkshake theory. I really like, those are two theories that are not very well like talked about much out there. And so when you find like a unique perspective, it's cool to follow those. You get stuck in the same old thing over and over again. I mean, it's it gets kind of, not only does it get boring, but then again, it's just like, well, at some point these things have to start playing out, right? And that's where, like, I really feel when you look at things in like a devastating fashion, like, the Federal Reserve is going to cause all this pain and misery and suffering and all this other stuff that's going to go along with it. When you look at it in that way, right, what ends up happening is that subconsciously you start looking for evidence that confirms that, right? And so when you start looking for it and you start speaking it and you start thinking it, well, then it becomes existence, right? And this is end up being like what you do literally to yourself, because the actions that you have taken subconsciously has led you right down that path, right? This is one of the reasons why I don't like everything that I look at. A lot of times, even when I think it's like, intense, like, holy crap, what I just read was really heavy. It was just like, man, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in, and it was just like, you got to hold back for just a minute and you think, okay, so what do I do with this? Right? Because I can't take this information and say it's going to hurt me, because then it will. That's exactly what it will do. Right? I have to take this information in and say, okay, so what is it that I need to do with this information in order to position myself for the best possible outcome that I can, right? And this is generally, you know, if you look at it, like, you end up being very calm about the situation. You look at it as just like, well, you know what, I don't need to be blowing this out of proportion like I kind of was. And you will find that a lot of times the information is just information. It's nothing scary, right? And it's not really scary to begin with. It was only scary because it was the unknown, and the unknown is scary, right? But once you come accustomed to that and you're like, no, it's just the unknown, and that's not scary. It's just the unknown, right? So anyhow, moving on. All right, it will be inflation as far as the eye can see. What about gold? What about gold? I mean, I like gold. I like gold and silver the same. Like, yeah, I like silver better than gold just because it's like easier to break down. So if we do run into, like, doomsday scenario, bad times, barter times, whatever you need to end up kind of unloading silver or gold, when you have small pieces of silver and you're like just trying to make like enough to like get some food or something like that, you just need to trade, just for a small portion. Having a smaller denomination of something, right? Pieces of silver, or, maybe, gram size, gold coins or something like that, that you can trade, that isn't a lot. Because a lot of times when you end up buying gold coins, you're buying like an ounce or something, or a half ounce, and then you got to get rid of a whole ounce. Like, you got to get rid of the whole damn thing. And if you want to, like, just need a piece of it. So that's where I find silver to be a little bit more, convenient, I guess, than gold. But in the general purpose of it, for like the reasoning to hold it, I think gold is probably a little bit better than silver, because it's going to carry that prestige, I guess. All right, up and away. Okay, thinking about thinking. So did the Fed needed all the money in the system while the supply chain breakdown was happening? Did they plan this? No, they didn't need any of that money in the system. They needed it in the system to make sure that everybody knew that it was there, so that they would be freaked out about it. But that's ultimately what it is. I mean, if we listen to Ben Bernanke, so let me see if I can find it here. Oops. So in here, in his speech, he actually talks about that exact thing. All right, here we go. Okay. Like gold, the US dollars have value only to the extent that they are strictly limited in supply. But the US government has a technology called a printing press, or today, its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many US dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. By increasing the number of US dollars in circulation, or even by the credible threat to do so. Did you get that part? By increasing the dollars in circulation, or by the credible threat to do so. The U.S. government can also reduce the value of dollars in terms of goods and services. So just the credible threat, the threat of this quantitative easing and all the printing of the money would be enough. Right? Quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflation scenario the Fed was looking for, because that money never really left the banking system. It ended up sitting on the big banks' balance sheets, sitting there as reserves. And unless that money got lent into the system, it didn't really enter the system. And so all the money that got borrowed into the system was probably money that was going to get lent into the system no matter what anyway. But all this quantitative easing that gave the perception to the market that there was going to be this hyperinflation scenario, I know, I was one of them, right? Who thought that during the quantitative easing. It was a complete perception, right? That's what they were doing. They were manipulating that. And he says it right here. That was their plan. This is a speech that came from 2002, all right? And it says, we conclude that under a paper money system, a determined government can always generate higher spending and hence a positive inflation. And this is, so no, they didn't need to print all that money to create it, but they needed to in order to make sure that the people had that perception that there was going to be an inflationary scenario coming into the future, or else they wouldn't have believed it. If you didn't print the money, they would have been like, why would there be an inflation? That doesn't make any sense. So you had to have the money printer, you had to have the new money be there, or else the people would never have thought that there was going to be inflation. So they printed up all the money, put it back on the bank's balance sheets again, because it didn't, like, the stimulus ended the system, like the checks and stuff. So there was a good chunk that entered in. But we also have to understand that that money was entering in when there was low interest rates Inflation is a very difficult thing to find when the interest rates are close to zero, because the return on capital investment goes negative, right? So actually borrowing money going into the future is a deflationary thing that has taken place. You just can't seem to find inflation when you're near the lower bound of zero. It was the major problem coming from the Federal Reserve. They knew it, and that was part of this speech. This is what they were talking about. And so once you have hit this lower bound of zero, it's like all hell is like about ready to break loose, because you're running out of monetary policy and you can't find anywhere to stimulate from, because dropping interest rates just doesn't work, right? And so any stimulus that does happen, like the printing of money and stuff like that, it's done at this lower bound of zero where interest rates are low. The return on capital investment, you borrow this money, you get this money, right, from stimulus. You try to reinvest this back into the economy, and you find that whatever it is that you're investing back into, by the time you get the return on it, you have lost purchasing power on it. You have going negative, right? Purchasing power is going negative at this point. Like, no matter how much money you produce, you can't seem to get it. Right? It's just like, and that's hard. It's like very hard to put your mind around that part of it. It took me a while of listening to Dr. Lacey Hunt to finally figure this part out, right? But it's really what was taking place. So they had to get off the lower bound of zero to start making like the return on capital investment worthy again. See, once this money starts coming back in through capital investment, then it can start pouring back into the economy. Right? And this is like, you see how many pieces you have to put together here? It's like, you got to know a lot of stuff, It's not that difficult. Like, once you wrap your head around a lot of the stuff, it's just like each little part individually isn't that difficult. It's just like another little piece of it, But there's so much of it. There's so many little pieces to try and figure out. Right on. We got 163 likes with 145 of you watching. I love it when there's more likes than viewers. Yeah, dude. Okay. In America, way supply and demand. And if there is no demand, create it. How is job owning not the same as yelling fire in a theater? Okay. No, that's actually a really good question, because the difference between job owning and credible threats, or job owning and forward guidance, right? There's a few different ways to look at this, right? There's the credible threat. There's job owning and forward guidance, which I think are kind of like the same thing, fairly close. And then there's signaling, right? And these are three different forms of this, like, putting the narrative out there, putting the idea out there, right? So credible threats. The credible threat is like the special purpose vehicle, right? We have this entity sitting in waiting to buy corporate debt. We have funded this entity with hundreds of billions of dollars. We are about ready to buy corporate debt with this special purpose vehicle. This is the credible threat. They didn't know that the markets were going to go and like, woohoo, let's go buy in some corporate debt, right? They didn't know that was going to happen. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say they didn't know. In all their documents, they didn't say that was the plan, right? I mean, they might have had that in the back of their head that this was going to end up being the outcome. But ultimately, it was to support these corporations with funding by buying their bonds. So by setting that special purpose vehicle up and making that announcement that they had the hundreds of billions of dollars to buy this corporate debt, that was the credible threat, right? That was a very well orchestrated, calibrated, credible threat, right? Because if the market didn't go in and buy it, then the Fed would have, right? They would have gone in there and bought that corporate debt. Okay. Now, jawboning and forward guidance. This is a little bit different in the sense that it is actually what the Federal Reserve is saying they're going to do. Here at the next meeting, we are going to raise interest rates by 3/4 of a percentage point. At the next meeting, we are going to raise the interest rates by 3/4 of a percentage point, right? Put that out there. Make sure everybody hears it. We are going to do this. Get ready. Get in position. This is definitely going to happen. And all the markets start to move. And they start getting into position ahead of the Federal Reserve's stated forward guidance, jawboning. We are going to do this, right? So that's like, you got credible threats, which is like, hey, we're gonna, set up this particular thing. Oh, look what you all did. All right, cool, right? Then you got the forward guidance, the jawboning, right? Which is like, hey, we are, telling you right now we are planning to do this. And then you got signaling. Now, signaling's a little different. This is the perception that the Federal Reserve is now putting out there into the markets. Oh, we're done raising rates. In fact, we're going to be dropping interest rates. Guaranteed. Federal Reserve done with interest rates hikes. Lower interest rates coming into the future. Blah 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 blah. All across the damn internets, you see this, this particular narrative flying across it. That's the signaling, right? That's signaling to the markets what it is that the Federal Reserve is thinking and cluing them in on what the possibilities is coming into the future. They are getting the markets, the markets are so confused. They're like, I thought the Fed was going to lower rates. They said they were going to lower rates. Everybody said that they were going to lower rates. Why didn't they lower rates? Well, they weren't listening to the uneducated economist who says, nah, that's bullshit, right? That's all credible threats that are taking place there. Or signaling or jawboning or whatever it is, right? So these are the three different forms of this style of putting out the narrative ahead of time to get the markets to react before the Federal Reserve does anything. And so, by putting out the signaling, even if, just think about how easy it would be for the Federal Reserve to turn the mortgage market around just by putting out the idea that they are looking at adjusting their balance sheets in accordance to their holdings of mortgage-backed securities. They don't even have to say what they plan on doing. Just the fact that they were looking at it and put out words that says that would be enough to start getting the markets to react to it. And I don't know exactly what reaction that would be. It would probably have to do with a lot of what's going on at the time. But they could just put out that narrative, right? Just put it out there into the media. And they don't have to do anything. They can continue operating the way they always have, but just by stating something about the mortgage market being, or the mortgage-backed securities on their balance sheet, just bringing up some sort of topic about that would be enough, and the mortgage markets would start reacting to it. And it would probably have to do with other news that has taken place at the time. Right? This stuff is so clear to me now. I see it I see it all the time now, And the easiest way to understand it is to know that the Federal Reserve did not fail. They did not F up, right? If you look at it as if they have no clue of what they're doing, then you would never see any of this stuff, because none of this would make sense. Actually, it hardly makes sense to begin with, but then it would really not be making sense. All right, did I get another super chat up there? Right on, man. You guys are all hanging out with me into the middle of the night, man. This is so awesome. Let's go find that thing. There it is. Oh, hey, it's not your problem. Right on. Not your problem. This is so cool to see so late. Finally, a good company. Well, I code and do code reviews. Oh, man. This is awesome. Take care, UE. Well, thank you, not your problem, man. I really appreciate you sending me that $4.99. That's very cool of you. All you guys are very supportive of the channel, and I really appreciate you. You just, I know you hear me say it all the time, but I really do. And, especially these live streams, they're the most fun for me. They're the most interactive. We get to really break down a lot of the questions that, people have, filling in those blanks. That's what I really like. And that's what I really love about that membership too, you know. Like I can't push it enough because, you know, like that's what like I finally have a product or something. It's just like it makes me feel good. It's like holy moly, even though it's only $1, but it's like to me, it's just like man, it's cool. I got something that somebody could actually buy. Like, what is it that you have to sell, man? I got these live stream membership onlys that I break down some really good hardcore information and really pour it out, and we discuss it, and you know, people get very happy about it all. Hey, right on. I got another one over there. Hey, thanks, D. All right. D is the coolest person. She we met at the Silver Symposium. She's been a viewer of the channel for quite some time. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. What you had to say? Just saying hello and enjoying the live. Well, thank you so much, D. That is so cool of you to show that support for the uneducated economist. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Good D. Oh, thanks D. Good to see you. Yeah. UE, get some sleep. Yeah, I know I really need to. We're gonna give it a few more minutes here. I'm just having too much fun. I'm sure there's a few more questions out there that I would love to like, you know, cover before we call it quits, but we'll give it like another 20 minutes and give it a 2-hour live stream tonight. All right. Let's see here. What about a few years ago when they were talking about a $1 billion coin? People were picturing a silver dollar. Oh, that $1 billion platinum coin or that $1 trillion platinum coin to just like, you know, like you just issue out this coin and pay off all the debts and everybody is just like cool with it. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Um, I mean, I would love to say that it does, but like I tried to like, you know, follow that for a little bit, you know, and say, okay, let's like, you know, just be open-minded about this and let's, you know, assume how this is supposed to work. I still can't grasp it because if I have a bunch of bonds that are sitting in my possession and I need to get paid back so that I can have a living, like so I can live my retirement. Printing up a coin and then selling that coin to the Federal Reserve for a bunch of dollars doesn't exactly cover the debts, right? Like the reason why okay, hold on. The reason why okay, the reason why the US Treasury debt is so valued is because people know if they hold a US Treasury debt, they are going to get paid because men with guns will go and take whatever it is from their citizens that they need to if they don't pay their taxes to make sure that those US Treasuries get covered. So it's a pretty good deal if you hold these US Treasuries. Like, you know, their government will literally take from their people. Men with guns will come and take it from them and pay you. Pretty cool deal. So, that's why they're so valuable, right? I mean, it's like, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but that's like, you know, the epitome of it. That's what it is, you know? Hey, Simon, late night live stream. Yeah, it sure is. Hey, Hyder, we loved your bear story. Damn bear. I got to go back and listen to the bear story. All right, pulling off a long live stream with the same caliber of content as a vlog only shows knowing the content extremely well. Yeah, I am not faking it. Like I don't need this stuff. Like I don't need I mean the only reason why I have it here in front of me is so that I can get the dates and I can make sure that I state it right. But the information that's within it, I have already internalized. Like I got this. And I mean, you know, it's another reason why I didn't take in a lot of political view, you know, when I was doing this is because there's so much to take in and it can completely cloud a lot of the stuff. Like people are under the impression that the Federal Reserve is pretty much under the pressure of the administration, right? And here's the thing about it is that you know a politician is lying when their lips are moving, right? Just like a lawyer or anybody else, right? You know it. There's nothing that they say that is like anything other than trying to convince you that they're the better dude. So when I hear like Donald Trump going off again about Jerome Powell, saying that he needs, like, if Jerome Powell's going to create a situation in which that's going to cause Biden to win, right? Or something of that nature. Like he's like accusing Trump, Trump is accusing Powell, right, and saying like this is the individual that is going to create the havoc within our nation, right? To me, that is probably one of the most ignorant statements that I have ever heard, especially somebody coming from Trump, who knows damn well that there's 12 voting members of the FOMC, and by removing Powell, it doesn't do anything. But yet it creates a hell of a message out there for the constituents, doesn't it? See, hardly anybody even knows what the Fed is. Barely anybody knows who Powell is. They certainly don't know who the hell the FOMC is, right? And so by Donald Trump pointing his finger at Powell, saying, this dude right here, he's going to be the reason why, blah, 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 him, he is completely pointing his finger at a messenger, and he knows it, right? What is he trying to do? He's not doing anything. That's not real. That's not fixing any kind of problem. That's not like dealing with it. That is complete show. It's a complete show. And I cannot take it. I don't like it. Like, I can't handle that stuff. You know, when I see it as plain as day like that, it's just like, oh, you know, and it's just like, you just like, it ratchets down again on my respect level. It's just like, I can't take that stuff, you know? It's gaslighting at its finest. All right, not your problem. You are gold. You have a lot of unique perspectives, and I appreciate that. I'm working right now. Seeing a late live stream made my night. Hey, right on, not your problem. Well, you know, I tell you what, we got a lot of people who joined in on this stream. I mean, at one point I saw that we had 175 people watching. We got 135 right now. I mean, I don't even know what time it is. It's got to be getting close to 11 or so, I imagine. You know, this is awesome. I didn't think that there would be this many people out here this late at night. So, you know, we're having a good time. And breaking this stuff down, when you do this right before bed, this is another important thing. This is a good time to do this too, because when you think about all this stuff and you put it into your thoughts just before you go to sleep, you will internalize this stuff. The next day you'll wake up and you will have so much different understanding of all this stuff. This is one of the things that, like, this is how I've been able to do a lot of these things, is that I literally study right before I go to sleep. Like, I will read something that I want to do, like a video on the next day. I will read the articles or the speech or the topic or whatever it is that I want to discuss the next day right before I go to sleep. And then as I sleep, my mind will sit there and spin on that, and the next day the videos just kind of come out. And it is like, I don't even really have to think about how I'm doing them, you know. All right. The federal government is like WWE, yeah. It's a good time slot on YouTube. Yeah, I just realized, like, I was just thinking about that, because the last time I did a late night live stream was on a Sunday night after bingo. And yeah, we had a bunch of people who had joined in on that one as well. It was something like over 100 people. So maybe this is where I need to find my time on YouTube. Hey, right on, D. You joined the channel. Thank you so much. All right, you're going to love it. There's so many membership-only videos out there that, you know, you can go back and watch it now. That is so cool. We're up to, like, I don't know, 300, better than 350 members to the channel now. And this is really what I would love this channel to be, is members channel. Like, you guys are the sponsor for the channel, like not a gold sponsor, not some company I never heard of or anything like that. The viewers of the channel sponsoring it, right? And then, man, if I could make that happen and make this YouTube channel like my life, because this is really what I feel is driving me. It's my passion. It's my purpose. This is what I was meant to do. And if I could do this for a living and you guys be the sponsor of the channel, that would mean everything. Like, I could just, like, forget about all the rest of the stuff out there and just focus in on bringing you guys the valuable information that I feel that is is being missed. You know, it's just like I don't know, man. But thank you again, D. So, did I miss some questions back there? Let me cruise back up here just a minute. All right. Well, I don't know. Was there any other questions or anything we need to cover tonight, or did I miss, or did I say wrong? How do I become a member here? Can't see here in the mobile phone, unlike on the web browser. So if you go down into the description of the video, there should be a link right there towards the very top of the description. And then you can always find it again on the homepage of the channel. So if you just kind of go to the homepage, there should be a link to it in there. But yeah, down in the link of the description, there should be a link, or down in the description, there should be a link to the channel. All right. I love listening to stuff late at night while I prepare for the next morning. It usually around this time. Yeah, and it really made the difference when I started doing that. Like, before I would just like, I don't know, just look at whatever random thing, just whatever YouTube videos or something. And but when I started like looking at like the information right before I went to bed, right before I fell asleep, then it was like, man, the videos became so much easier to make. And so I was like, well, that's the secret right there. Just study the stuff before you go to bed. All right. You've been banging out the content for a while. Well, thank you, April. I appreciate that. I try to put out a video every day, and sometimes I just can't help it. I got to put out 2 videos a day and 2 videos in a live stream, and I don't know, maybe tomorrow I might not put anything out, but it's just like I don't know. I just do it when I see it, I guess. All right. I can't believe I joined so late. Sorry. Don't worry about that, D. I'm glad you're here. I mean, glad I try to get, I love to see that membership grow by a little bit every day. And if today is the day that I get to see you join in, then that's awesome. You don't have to apologize. I'm glad you're here. All right. You may have to pack out the chat to see the membership button. Oh, back out the chat to see the membership. Yeah, it's not super late. It's not super later on the West Coast. Yeah, you need to try doing a bit more across the platforms, like other platforms out there. How does SOFR benefit the repo market versus LIBOR? To be honest, I don't know. Like, I thought there was going to be this huge, like, Lynette Zhang actually had me all kind of tweaked out a little bit about the switching from LIBOR over to SOFR, but it doesn't seem to have much of an impact on anything. As far as like the dramatic effect that she was talking about all these different contracts that were written in LIBOR that all of a sudden had to be switched over to SOFR and stuff like that. There was like this huge like possible like catastrophic thing that could have come from it, but I didn't see anything pan out from any of that stuff. As far as like the comparison and going into the repo and all that, I have a hard time, like, I don't know, like a lot of these markets, like even like the unemployment rates and stuff like that, like all these numbers, I don't really like trust what they are or where they are. Even people kind of gave me a hard time saying, I can't believe you trust the unemployment numbers. It was like, I don't really trust the unemployment numbers. It's the Federal Reserve who looks at that unemployment numbers, and what I trust is that they're going to use that number to conduct their monetary policy with. So that's what I am trusting on, right? Is that they're going to look at that to conduct their monetary policy, and that's what I'm going to be, focusing in on. But when it comes to a lot of these other things, like I just don't believe them. Like I don't believe the actual unemployment number, but I believe the direction in which it's going, because that's generally how the Federal Reserve conducts their monetary policy, right? So if you can kind of see the movement in which it's getting to and the amount that it's moving, that might give you a little bit better idea on what's happening within unemployment. But to look at the number itself and compare it to past, I don't think that's going to work. In fact, most of the numbers out there that we use and we compare, none of them really work. And that's really because of the FASB 56, because the government already basically stated that they are going to hide the real numbers and present us with fake numbers that are good enough for us to do all our active investments and, market analysis and all that other stuff with. But they can't show us the real numbers for national security reasons. And I actually did a video on this. It was one of the first videos that I ever, like in the first year of me putting out videos. It's called FASB 56, right? FASB 56, something like that. And so anyway, that's one of the things. Like I have a tendency to kind of back away from a lot of these things that are like, presented numbers that I don't know if they really mean much. And then like, even though I do use some of their numbers, it's not like I'm really using their numbers. I kind of look more of like, again, like the direction it's going and by how much, because I think that's more telling of the reality. All right. So where are we at? 1 hour and 55 minutes. Cool. We got like 5 more minutes, guys, and then we're going to call it quits. All right. Whoever is in love with a politician is in love alone. Where about, okay, connection. Here we go. Where about you these days? Worked at Shand Power Plant for 3 weeks. Huh. I asked about what your thoughts are on the potential of stock collapsing. Why would they go in hand with the potential mass layoffs that other channels are talking about coming soon? It's really difficult to predict the stock market, and I don't want to predict like where the stock market is going to go as a general, because I really just don't know. I would assume, this is the thing, like I'm going to assume that there's going to be some form of a liquidity crisis coming in the few months, right? Now, how bad that looks and to what extent, I don't know, right? But it seems to be pretty apparent. I mean, just taking my job, for example, like I just look at the amount of traffic that I get coming through the store, and it's not a lot, right? Now, I do live out in the middle of kind of the Pacific Northwest, and there's like, a small community out here. But I've been doing this for a very long time, like 20 years, right? And so, like, I'm looking around at the other guys who have been doing this for 15, 20 years, and I'm like, y'all feeling recession? And they're like, yes. Like, they all say the same thing. It is very slow. It is very reminiscent of how slow it was during the Great Financial Crisis. It is, like, obvious that there is something taking place, right? But you don't really see it out there in the mainstream media yet, Oh shit, I forgot where I was going with that. What were we talking about? Oh, the stock market. That's right. And so when I think about like what could be a liquidity crisis coming and way that people react to that, right? Because now as things are slowing down, that there's going to be less profits that are going to be out there. If there's less profits, debts aren't going to get paid. And if debts don't get paid, then we're going to start having a major slowdown that's coming from that. Okay, so when this slowdown begins to take place, you're going to find that people are going to start needing cash, right? This is the liquidity crisis, right? Now, it's going to be in a different fashion for all kinds of people. For most of the people at the lower end, like the working class people, unless you lose your job, you're probably not going to notice much, right? You're going to hear a lot of talk on TV and stuff like that, but your life probably won't change a whole lot, right? Just simply because you're like don't have anything, and if you have your daily income or whatever, your day job, then your life doesn't change, right? You didn't have anything, you don't have anything to lose, there's nothing there going on, right? But if you have a pretty significant job, you get paid a lot, and it's dependent on an active economy, and you lose your $100,000 a year job, that's pretty devastating, right? So what happens to this person? Well, generally, if you have been making a decent income, and I'm not saying $100,000 is all that, like fantastic of an income, but it's a hell of a lot better than what most people are making, which is probably like $50,000 or less, right? So if you're in this position, you're earning $100,000 a year, you probably have purchased stocks, you probably purchased some toys, you probably purchased some things that are out there, right? And when it comes to you not being able to get an income coming in because you've lost your job, you have debts to pay, right? So now you're going to start selling off your toys, your items, your stuff, including stocks, right? Your stocks and bonds and everything else that goes with it. So in the middle of this liquidity crisis, because it's different for everybody, there is going to be people who are selling out of stocks just simply to try and get into the cash because they need the money to live, right? It's not like they're selling out of stocks for like, reasons that are unique to like the company or to the person themselves because they're retiring or something like that. This is everybody selling out of stocks not because they want to, but because they have to, right? And now at that time, this liquidity crisis, once it starts to really ramp up, this is when everything's on sale, right? And if you have cash on hand, you get to be able to pick up a lot of those toys that people are selling out of desperation. All right. 2 hours, guys. This was one of the funnest live streams that I've done in a while. You guys are great. I think these late night live streams are probably something we're going to have to do a little bit more of since they were so popular tonight. I want to thank everybody who has joined in. We got 117, 118 people watching right now and 179 likes. I love it when that like ratio is so high up like that. That just makes it so much fun. And I want to thank everybody for the super chats. You guys are always so very supportive. Thank you, D. And the gentleman, what was it? Swarm? So there's something about Swarm there. Go back and find it here. Thank you guys for joining the channel. You guys are very awesome, and I think you're going to get a lot of value out of the channel, and the experiences that we have had over the last few have been absolutely incredible. We've enjoyed the hell out of it. I know I have. And going from some of the comments that you would see not only in the live streams that I do on the members only, but also in the regular videos, you will find that the people who are watching these, like the testimonials coming from them, they're telling it all, man. They're saying that this is like good stuff, and to keep going with it. All right. Love the late nighters. Yeah, all nighter. I knew you would, man. All right. Is liquidity crisis the same for individual corporations and countries? All right. One last one, and then I'm going to call it quits. Is it the same for everybody? No, it's not going to be the same, but it's going to be the same in the sense that once the liquidity crisis begins, that it's going to be the same for everybody in the fashion that access to dollars is really what the problem is going to be, right? It's just like you can imagine, like literally like liquid drying up. That's going to be the same thing. If you're desperate for water and you can't find it anywhere, what would you do to get it, right? And so you'll start selling off all kinds of stuff in order to get that water. Well, the dollars are something very similar to that. So if you look at it in that fashion, whether you're a corporation or an individual or, whatever, a government, a municipality or something, if you're sitting in a position in which that you are very cash heavy, right? Or at least you're not debt burdened, right? Then you're probably going to do much better than a corporation that's heavily debt burdened, right? So is it affect everybody the same? No, but everybody is going to be immersed in the liquidity crisis, as some people will have plenty and other people will be suffering, and those who have it will be able to go to those who are suffering and say, hey man, you're going to have to give up a lot to, ease your suffering. And that's really what it's going to be like, in my opinion. Thank you guys for joining in on tonight's live stream. This was absolutely just a blast to have you all. Thank you everybody for the support, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.